Hi, Kate, Jonathan, Jeff. Really good to see you again. It's been a week since we last met.
Hello, gentle people.
Yeah, we're
Good
on
to see you, Angus.
we're on chapter 10, and we're already busting our brains. We've already found loads of problems with some of the conclusions or some of the ideas and questions that begin to surface when we dig into this chapter, and even something we talked about last week as well. So I don't think we've got any idea where this conversation is going to go. But there are some interesting points that are brought up in this chapter. So I think we'll just dig into them straight away. If that sounds like a plan.
It does.
So let's have a look. So right at the beginning of chapter 10, I'm just going to read it and then we'll see where it takes us, okay? The naive man and woman and baby and child who acknowledges as real only what he can see with his eyes and grasp with his hands requires for his moral life also a basis for action that shall be perceptible to the senses. He requires someone or something to impart the basis for his action to him in a way that his senses can understand. And then in this way, there arise as moral principles the authority of family, state, society, church, and God, as previously described. So what's he problematizing here, do you think?
Well, he's stating a fact or facts. So there's not, I wouldn't say there's a problem yet, but we feel a problem with that because we feel within us an urge to freedom, which this doesn't seem to be offering.
And we know from the work up to this point that to be transfixed with the world of percepts is to have only half of reality.
And that therefore in the world of percepts, is the realm of non-freedom, in the sense that natural laws determine it. It's theoretically impossible to talk of a freedom of something that is based in the senses, notwithstanding what you just said, Jeff, that it's only half of reality, but in the sense that with sensory information, what the senses can receive, take to themselves, that the natural laws that guide all the phenomena, they are exactly that. They are natural laws that are determining. And if all of our experience is based on seeing things that are being determined, then also that means that there is no possibility, not even a theoretical possibility, of freedom within that realm. And this is one of the pernicious aspects of a theory of knowledge that's based purely in the sensory realm. It's condemned to non-freedom from the get-go, and
there's a strange problem in here. So that you're right, because if it's based in the sense perceptible, and so we're either bound by our bodies and the earth on which we live and so forth, but then there's also family, state, society, church, and even divinity. Take family. So there's my father who tells me what to do, my mother who tells me what to do. They're the sense perceptible thing, authority telling me what to do. But I see a problem there, because then the sort of question is, So where did you get this idea from?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Where did that originate? A ditto for state, society, and church.
Yeah.
I guess there's no such real thing as a naive person, though. Like, right? There's naive points of view, but then there's, and then we have. Hang on, where did that idea come from? But then you fall into metaphysical realism's traps. And as I read this book, I went, "Oh no, I'm a metaphysical realist. I know I'm a dualist," because I was. But we'll get to there. But I think that's the problem for me. The way that it's set out is that you walk along. The points of view are characterized as people that don't actually exist.
Well, maybe as a child, at least they do. Because
yes, I agree with what you're saying. In that there's nobody who's completely naively real, or a naive realist, except that's exactly what empiricism tries to set up. That the percepts are the only things that are real, and you can't believe in a reality otherwise, and then you end up with really, it's not naive at all. It's cynical, because you must renounce that which is the impulse for you to know. This is then the Kryenbuhl description. This moral impulse that it's the heart of trying to understand and trying to come to terms with the world, ends up with this insistence on the percepts being the only thing that are real. Ends up being these we end up being slaves to externalities, and whether it's their moral principles, or an external god, or the state, or public opinion, or I mean, you just never get past the level of trying to get along in the world as if you were an adolescent. So I agree that there's no instantiation of an individual who can maintain naive reality. But it is a belief system that denies the moral impulse of the self.
I think there might actually be a purely naive person, in the sense that they move around, that even their own thoughts are all ones that have already been prefabricated by family or state or society or church or some other authority.
Perhaps I just haven't met anyone like that.
I don't know, but I'm just imagining it's quite possible. I can imagine some might.
Yeah. That's a good way of saying it.
I think, but for me, part of what he's setting up here is to these are the regular ways in which moral principles arrive. It's like the values that are given to us through our family, the values that a state advocates, or the church, or God through the church, God as an external authority idea. That these are all methods, these are all ways in which we can acquire it's the mental framework for our motives, but in the sense that we haven't created them ourselves, we are not free. That for me is the essence of what he's trying to do here.
Yeah, and in a sense, I think you could actually say that nearly all of us are like this, in the sense that I could even if I don't accept family, state, society, or the church, do I ever at any point say, not even God is behind this? Because that's quite a bold step. Because we see, in the next ones, that even when we get beyond that, we don't actually, we kind of drag that along. So we smuggle it in kind of with us and drag it along in our new version of how we think we're being free.
Well, I mean, if God is external to us, then it's not ourselves who's acting. It's not ourselves that are the basis of our motives and of our moral actions, our moral imagination, the moral techniques.
It could even be this that we come to that point of conscience where God could be internal to us, but still be something that isn't us.
Yes, it has. Yeah. I was just thinking that, but that's how I feel about God.
And what I think you've just described there is this picture. This was a picture particularly for conscience, but it is the idea that first of all we have the divine world streaming into us, or we could say it's the family, or we could say it's the state. But it's not until we actually consciously choose those motives as our own moral principles that they become really our own necessity. And this, just building a little bit further on that idea, this idea of conscience that gets raised in the chapter. It was already mentioned briefly in the last chapter, but it was, I believe, question mark. But here Steiner has told us in other lectures, and I'm bringing it in here because it's an uncontroversial one, where he refers to, it's like a very definite period in history where humanity, the motive powers, the correcting motive powers were definitely seen as coming from without. So if you go back to ancient Greece, 500 BC, then basically everybody at that time there is no such thing as an inner voice. The conscience that we have now, it was experienced as beings, it's like following us or punishing us. It's like it's an external reality that's chastising us for the things that we've done, that's like the bad deeds that we've done. So this was like the corrective. This was part of the corrective impulse that was guiding humanity at that stage. And so when Aeschylus writes his plays, so the Furies or the Erinyes, they're the same thing. They are the voice of the gods telling humanity, you're doing the wrong thing, and just like they get chased around and punished for their evil deeds. But in Euripides, which is less than 100 years later, this concept of Erinyes or Furies, Erinyes is the Greek word. They were already in his plays in ancient Greece. It's disappeared, and what used to be an outside force, correcting force, has now become an inner voice. And this squares a lot with the whole, one of the essential aspects of Judaism. It's this idea of like bringing God within. It's not this external authority outside, so like bossing us around, telling us what to do. It's something we're internalizing. So it's this involution, evolution, and vice versa that's happening to us as human beings. And here we've got a moment in time. It's like this 100-year period where you can see quite a clear step forward in Greece. with the experience of a human being, how quickly it can actually change here. So I think this conscience question is a really interesting one, because if the authority is external to us, family, state, church, God, then freedom is always an impossibility. But once that correcting impulse becomes a part of our own inner selves, then it can be no longer thought of as an external force, because it's intrinsic to who I am. It's my voice it's my conscience that is judging my actions and correcting them if I'm making well, not if, when I'm making mistakes.
Can I ask a question? Why is he bringing in the second part of this then? Well, first of all, what I wanted to say is that I think I'm getting a little bit of what Chad was trying to bring in the group, which is that we don't exist as monads going through the world. We co-evolve with our environment. So we have if, like, for example, if we're working against the laws of nature, we're not going to do very well, right? And so in a sense, nature does speak back to us. If you make compromises like New Orleans did before the great hurricane Katrina, and you make 100-year provisions instead of 5,000-year provisions because your government is corrupt, then nature's going to bite you in the ass. And that's exactly what happened. And it's a sort of the fury of God visited, in a sense. So there's, I wouldn't go so far as to say now like the fundamentalist Christians do in this country, say they were being punished for being gay or whatever, or being hedonists or that sort of thing. But it does work that way. So there is that. And then the other part is this: he's sort of saying the problem with conscience then is that once you've placed all of the power into this internal reality, that you go beyond naive consciousness into a sphere where moral laws have become independently existing standards.
Except that's not. Hold on a sec, Jeff. That's not a problem, though, is it? This is where this is where it becomes this internalization of moral laws, and in that sense, it's true to the idea of freedom. When you said it's
I disagree.
Well, the problem is. Let me follow up, Jonathan, and then because there's the second part of this, which is that they are no longer carried by real bearers, but have become metaphysical entities existing in their own right. First of all, I'm not sure I understand what a move he made there. Why does this independent power within him move beyond naive consciousness? And
perhaps if I read the text, because there's an important part at the top of the first bit of that text, so I'll read it. My value judgment is it appears too important to me. So he says, the highest stage of development of naive realism in the sphere of morality is that where the moral commandment, moral idea, is separated from every being other than oneself, and is thought of hypothetically as being an absolute power in one's own life. What man first took to be the external voice of God, he now takes as an independent power within him, and speaks of this inner voice in such a way as to identify it with conscience. But in doing so the problem, what my reading has been is the naive realism part that's problematic. But when he does this, in doing this, he has already gone beyond the stage of naive consciousness into a sphere where the moral laws have become independently existing standards. So they are these close to the universal maxims that we were like looking at just before we started talking today, that when we are acting morally and in accordance with those universal standards, we are doing so from a free position. It's like, so I'm mixing ideas here. It's the lighter yoke of what do they call it within Christianity? I've heard it described. It's the light yoke as opposed to the heavy yoke.
Yeah, my
Our
yoke is a
morals
light
are,
one.
the world is governed by moral laws. They exist whether we like it or not. So when we are free, it's not like we can skip these moral laws and we can go around, I don't know, let's say poisoning people because we feel like it, because that's our own free decision. Our free decision isn't without consequences, which will then come back to affect both us and the rest of the world. So there has to be this, in my current way of saying it, there has to be this if I haven't got the family telling me, if I haven't got the state, if I haven't got the church, and if I haven't got an external God telling me, then it has to be an inner voice which I own, which is mine, which tells me that this is wrong.
I'm not sure that's what he's saying, because later he refers to as the conscience as abstract. But we can bookmark that bit. It's just this last sentence that gets me. They are no longer carried by real bearers, but have become metaphysical entities existing in their own right. Metaphysical entities that are unperceivable, that are bearing these standards without. I mean, so he's making a metaphysical claim here in the philosophy of freedom, or because that would seem like he's creating a metaphysically real in itselfness with these whatever these metaphysical entities existing in their own right.
I think that's the point, because it is an advance from naive consciousness, because one's no longer held by everything perceptual. But then you kind of take in, it's the same move we've seen, the Kantian sort of fixation, where you move out of bound by the perceptual realm, and then you create something in yourself as though it were real, as though it were a self-independent metaphysical entity. And that can only be, so you sort of correlate it with what a perceptibly real being would be, and then you make it something, an independent power in your own inner being, instead of letting it be you. And so then it is an advance in the sense that you've left naivety behind, but it's kind of like you've taken off from the ground, but you're still requiring a spaceship which is made out of the ground to carry you, until you can get to the point where you're flying by your own wings. It's not a metaphysical, because this is, I think, this point, Jeff. He's not claiming that they are real metaphysical beings. He's saying, it's a mistake. It's a misapprehension. It is an advance because you've left the naivety behind, but it's not the end.
Yeah, I agree with you, and that is what I was responding to Angus about. Kate, what do you say?
Oh, I just agree, because I was confused about where this conversation was. Hang on a minute.
Help me understand the perspective you're trying to. I'm still not understanding how you're seeing it, Jeff. Give me another go.
I think he's suggesting that this is an abstraction. This idea of conscience is an abstraction, and I think what I hear you saying is that it moves from naive realism into into an actual lawful relationship with the world and existing standards, and that the world, as Zach Stein and McGilchrist talked about in their conversation, that there's existing value, or there's existing moral structure to the world, and that our conscience is just coming into line with it. I think that's what you're saying. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes, not as a static idea, but definitely the way I've been thinking about it is that, yeah, I mean, all of our actions have moral consequences.
I agree with you, and I mentioned that too, but I don't think that's what he's saying here. And I think
Okay.
Jonathan and I are seeing eye to eye, and I believe Kate agrees, though I'm not sure on what basis Kate is agreeing.
He says later on, and I don't know, I'm sure, Angus, you have that in your ideas when you're talking, but he says, naive realism destroys freedom by subjecting man to the authority of a perceptible being, or eventually to the authority of the abstract inner voice, which it interprets as conscience. So that's where he takes it. So even though I've engulfed it, and I've made this like a reciprocal activity by having it internalized, I'm still only acting lawfully, and I'm only interpreting that as myself. But it's sort of just a stream that's coming in me and going out again. It's not my free decision.
Yeah, because I wonder, Angus, with you, if what are actually your thoughts and decisions about what to do, your conscience, we could call that conscience, it's your own thoughts and decisions, you then are kind of ascribing to an independent power in your inner being, just out of sort of habit or something.
So if I give a description of how I think conscience works, and it's why it's so important in relation to the question of freedom, that if this, when I perform an action, that will have its knock-on consequences, and if it's been a bad action, and whether I knew it was good or bad when I actually did it, the voice of conscience is that which wakes me up to the fact that I might have done something that I didn't intend to do, something that I didn't want to do, that is bad. So according to the three maxims, it's not helped me, it's not helped civilization, it's not helped mankind, if I put it very simplistically like that. And that's a reality that us as living and acting in the human realm. We're always doing that. We're always impacting the world around us, and that's an inevitable part of living. So you've got that on one side, and if freedom is ever going to be possible, just like we were talking about within the realm of natural science, it's a world where it's determined. If we can't, in my mind, being completely free obviously doesn't mean just doing what we want to do, because what we do has consequences for the world around us, and this is a feedback mechanism, whether it's healthy what you did or whether it was unhealthy.
Yes, but what happens if what you want to do is what the whole rest of the world is happy with and would want? Do you see? Because then there's no norms, there's no sort of maxim or anything. But nevertheless, it's not the.
I'm thinking of, I'm doing a course in natural medicine at the moment, and we're talking about these sort of abstract values that are at the basis of naturopathy. And one of them is from Hippocrates, which is, I'm going to say it in Latin, but it basically means the healing power of nature. And the idea is that nature in balance is right, and in nature in the right course is balanced and good, and we are internalizations of nature. And the problem of health is that there are obstructions there in your body, in your mind, and the job of a physician is to find those obstructions, get rid of them, so that the living natural vital force can do its job. And I think this is sort of, I guess that's maybe it's a similar thing with the voice of God coming out and then going in as a conscience, and then in this sort of loop. And part of thinking and part of freedom is judging where those obstructions are, I suppose. Is that
whether we're creating harmony or disharmony in that whole?
Yes. I don't know if that's where freedom lies, but I do think that's where thinking comes in. Does that make any sense?
Yes. Yeah, but and I don't think it's this conscience that he's describing, what you're describing. What it is human nature in relationship to nature.
Well, that's like the body. It's not free. Like the way your body works is a reflection of how nature works. You didn't choose that.
Mm-hmm.
So same with your conscience. You didn't choose to have your conscience. It's a sort of reflection of laws outside. It's like the cultural version of this. So
or it's the
cultural law.
If you truly understand reality, then you would be acting out of you'd be acting out of the nature of reality, including human nature, but also in relationship with that which is universal. That which human nature is in dialogue with in the universal sense, and so to be true is also to be good. In other words, there's to be healthy. And we talked this morning about Mary Magdalene and the Christ says it's through a spiritual understanding that you will be healthy, and it is the lack of spiritual understanding that makes us sick. And I think that goes right along with what you're saying, and it goes along with what Angus is saying. It's just that I don't think that's what he's saying about conscience here. He's saying conscience is somehow an abstraction here. This is why I brought
no, that's not what I'm saying. No, I'm saying this goes beyond that. This is what he's saying in this text.
It goes beyond it to beings to they are no longer carried by real bears, but have become metaphysical entities existing in their own right. You're saying he's making a metaphysical claim here that there are beings that hold the moral laws as standards, and that conscience is the way in which that is spoken to us.
And we are that metaphysical being. We are that. What is it when he's describing thinking is the only realm in which naive realism is actually true. Everything else, naive realism, falls down. And the metaphysical, it's like a metaphysical means it's the substance on which we stand. It's like that which creates what is, and then the conscience is that which creates our own moral foundation. In that sense, that's how I'm understanding this.
I think we're going to have to move on and see if that actually is what's revealed, because I think that the three of us have a different understanding of conscience, and I'm pretty sure that the three of us have a different understanding of what he means by these metaphysical entities, though that is a very intriguing notion. But we are real bearers of that. So he says there are no longer carried by any real bearers. So this is the open question for me, because I think you put that was the strongest case that you made for what you're saying, I think, but again, it just doesn't seem to be borne out.
Can
by
I
this
bring in
idea.
an illegal part? We're not supposed to do this.
Illegal?
We're going to bring it. We're going to bring in some
Oh,
spiritual science into this as well, because I think it is relevant and it's interesting here. Because Steiner talks about how conscience will continue to develop as consciousness becomes imbued with Christ powers, and he describes how in the future, when we perform an action, we will see the karma that we're setting up for ourselves. I'm sure the rest of you are aware of this idea, yeah?
No.
It's like so we are moving towards a time. So it's part of human nature. This is both. I can give the negative flip side of this as well. But it's as we move into the future, because Christ has become the Lord of karma, this means that we will have, let's call them waking dreams of the karma that's awaiting us because of the action that we've performed. Is this ringing any bells or not?
Not specifically. I mean, I know
Okay.
I can feel comfortable with that as a statement based on what my reading of Steiner's notions of karma and reincarnation, and that there's a point at which we will be able to perceive anticipatorily, basically ourselves in our environment, that which was not individuated, that's left over in our environment, in the plant world, in the animal world, that we leave behind, but it has not been spiritualized to go to the midnight sun and come back. But that would also entail remembering the karma. So that would remembering previous lives, and I'm not sure that really says anything about this conscience thing.
I agree with you. I think part of my problem in thinking about this is I've got that baggage going on in my background of this evolution of conscience that is. It seems to be a real aspect, and what is this inner voice, what is it? It's what's its function? Why is it with us?
For me,
perhaps you're right. Perhaps we should move on.
I just would say that
we're a little bit stuck.
Yeah, I think for me, I liked what Kate said last time as relates to the moral maxim and intuition, and that I'm better off, rather than putting a moral maxim in front of me, to allow my intuition to actually deal with the circumstances in reality in front of me, so that I can know with the surety of my intuition that I'm acting out of love. Right, that my act is an act out of love, and I don't. Yeah, so we just leave that there, because I do think we need to get unstuck from this.
Okay. So I'll read this part as well. According to the monistic view, man may act unfreely when he obeys some perceptible external compulsion. He can act freely when he obeys none but himself. Monism cannot recognize any unconscious compulsion hidden behind percept and or concept. If anyone asserts that the action of a fellow is done unfreely, he must identify the thing or the person or the institution within the perceptible world that has caused the person to act. And if he bases his assertion upon courses of action lying outside the world that is real to the senses and the spirit, then monism can take no notice of it. According to the monistic view, then, man's action is partly unfree, partly free. He finds himself to be unfree in the world of percepts, and he realizes within himself the free spirit.
I really like it a bit because it kind of solved my issues that I had last week. I mean, if this is true, anyone asserting an action of a fellow man is done unfreely, then we must identify the thing or the institution that caused it, that means it's unfree. That helped me greatly because what it did is it freed me from the last clause of Jungian psychology, where I am constantly obsessed with all these layers of possible motives that I feel like I have to untangle to know if I'm acting free. And that paragraph says you don't have to do that because those aren't actually real. All of those concepts of the ideas of, oh, I might be doing that because of this memory that I had when I was a child, or I might be doing that because I have unintentionally absorbed this, you know, I've unconsciously absorbed rules that are part of a code that I haven't even become aware of yet, and they all exist kind of deep inside me in this tangled mess. But that paragraph says no, those are all silly, not silly, they're not real. It's little abstract ideas that I have about myself, and there's only two things that are real, and that's the spirit, and that's perceptible things. And that, I'm like, oh, okay. Is it really that simple?
Yeah, I feel that too. Sorry, Angus. Yeah.
I was going to say this. It also talks to this misnomer question about whether we're free or whether we're not free. It's so often it's presented as a binary option. It's yes or it's no. And what he's indicating here is, I think you talk about degrees of freedom in different realms. Yes, as long as we undeniably there are aspects of us that are unfree by the mere fact of living in the physical realm, but that isn't the only realm that we live in. We live in the realm of intuitions. We have the possibility of living in the realm of intuition, where freedom is that liberating aspect. So I feel the same type of relief that Kate's talking about here. It's not an either or. It's understanding the recognition that sometimes we aren't free, but in other areas we are.
It translated freedom to spiritual activity in a lot of translations because
Kate, it's a bit difficult to hear you. Can you move a bit closer to the mic? We can hear you nice and clearly when you're a bit closer.
Or is it? Yes?
Yes, yeah. Go ahead.
I was saying that I suppose that's why they translated freedom as spiritual activity, because it's an action that isn't done all the time but can be done. I don't have a problem with the word freedom though. I think but it's sort of, I guess that paragraph is sort of reflects the translative note about what freedom is.
Yeah, this is a really fine point to delineate at this point, I think, because we are so infected by this Freudian and Jungian notion of the unconscious, and then von Hartmann's notion of the unconscious, which he was the sort of godfather of that notion, and in a secular society where there is no spirit, there is no self, even then the idea that we are absolutely biased. I just had this conversation with a parent at the school, and that she just cannot accept that we're not absolutely biased, and there's no aspect of us that isn't absolutely biased, and that has to constantly be worked on. This is the whole the unconscious bias torture that people are putting other people through. They don't know anything about the unconscious, they have no sophisticated notion of what might be going on from a karmic standpoint, say, and then there's no notion of freedom in it, because what can you do about it? Well, only the unbiased, the unconscious bias facilitator can help you do something about it, because it's obviously you're an absolute product of your culture, period, end of story, or your childhood, which is rooted in nested in a culture that is essentially this. I'm saying it's this, and it's a horrible thing to do to people and to do to each other, when we have in front of us the possibility of intuiting who we are to become. That's what I like about what you're saying, like that it's freedom, yes, and freedom is utilizes a spiritual activity that we call thinking. And I like also staying with that notion of spiritual activity in this case, because spiritual activity can be defined as self-determining. If everything is bias, and you're just a even if you're just a victim of your traumatic circumstances, why did they happen in the first place, right? If there's a karmic thread that you could pull through and then see in front of you who you can become because of the karmic thread, then that's a completely different gesture than this opaque relationship with the wounds that need to be the best you can do is normalize in some sense then.
It reminds me of that falling into the bondage of ideas thing.
Yeah.
If we don't consciously know our ideas, we fall into the bondage of them. It was there in chapter 1 or chapter 2, isn't it? Because what you're describing there is it's like the ultimate form of projection. Okay, so I'm completely unfree, so therefore you must be completely unfree. It's like Freud had his sexual problems, and he said everybody else has got the same problems as him. These are all thoughts that can only be questioned by thinking. And if you have a belief structure which believes it's it's the foundation of your thinking rather than the correct relationship, which is like the thinking underlies it, then you can't see any way through it. You've blinded yourself. This type of thinking blinds itself with a certain belief structure, and it becomes a frustrating experience talking to those type of people.
I like to, if you take a word like projection, and then I was thinking, what is that actually? Because projection is a term from this, I'm so tired, from this history of psychoanalysis. So I don't like it. I don't want to use it. But you can see it as if I experience myself and if I experience the world this way, and everyone else must. That's actually what really you're doing is just assuming that no one is free and that no one is an individual. That's what that is.
Yeah.
When you project onto something, you're just assuming no one is an individual. Everyone is a creature of nature.
No, that's the actual claim. That's the actual claim that's made from a naive realist perspective, where only the perceptual world is real and it produces you, right? So even you are just a result of this what is it? Relationless aggregate of flack.
Yeah.
So just to comment on that picture, it doesn't look like I am my own authority, but I see William Blake. This is a man shrugging the weight of heavy ideas off of his shoulders and gradually feeling his freedom. I think you can see that painting it's like in two ways, as somebody weighed down. But I don't know about you, Jonathan, your artistic sensitivities here, but I see a person like standing strong and getting ready to shake those rocks off.
Oh yeah, he's meditating up the power. Because but I mean, perhaps the point being, that if they're natural rocks and they're on his shoulders, they may be too heavy to shrug off. But there's a power inside that is it's not fettered by the natural, by cause and effect, by the natural world.
I think you're right. He's meditating there. His eyes are shut and he's getting ready to stand up and to throw those rocks. They're already, the one on the right hand side is already like beginning to break off.
It looks a bit like the wing of a moth to me.
Yeah, it does as well. Yeah. Okay, should we move on to the next slide? Okay, killing freedom. So he actually spends a couple of it's like best part of a page talking about how idealism and realism kill it, and I've just like picked out a little bit here which I'll read. Okay. Naive realism destroys freedom by subjecting man to the authority of a perceptible being, or of one conceived on the analogy of a perceptible being, or eventually to the authority of the abstract inner voice, which it interprets as conscience. Oh, we're back there again. Okay. The metaphysician who merely infers the extra-human reality cannot acknowledge freedom because he sees man as being determined mechanically or morally by a being in itself, as it's like external to itself as well, as like beyond knowledge. There.
I'll hold open this conscience idea that you're carrying, because he says that he interprets as conscience, which is that's interesting. It's an interesting open. It's an interesting opening for that inner voice to be intuition, or to be right, to be, oh, I don't know, a mental picture. You know, but a living knowledge body, say, that can truly respond and intuitively grab the concepts, intuitively with conceptual intuition, grab the right concepts out of this body of knowledge, or this knowledge body, and act in a self-determined manner. Yeah.
I wonder if part of what's going on here is it's like different ideas of what conscience is, because I think people can have a guilty conscience because they've taken on board a certain belief structure from family, state, church, or whatever, and that hasn't been acquired in freedom. That's been imposed, or it doesn't have to have been acquired in freedom. It can have been acquired unquestioningly, and in that sense it is not part of my being. It's only when I have fully permeated my it's like an aspect of my moral conscience that I can then be then I can consider myself to be free in that sense. But I think often conscience is linked to have a guilty conscience. Let's say what's going on at the moment. I don't know, have a guilty conscience about not housing Ukrainians because that's what everybody's doing. But that's something that's been set up as like expectations by other people. And it feels like quite normal that you might have a guilty conscience doing that if you want to like do things to help people. But that's not the same conscience that I think Steiner is talking about here. He's talking about this intuitive inner voice that is beyond the moral maxims from the perceptible world, family, state, church.
Okay.
Because for me, that's the only way I can get it to square with, if we haven't got conscience.
Does he use conscience another time in this chapter?
Yeah,
Other
it
than this
was
time?
where we got stuck a couple of this when we were looking at this here.
No, I mean, I think what Kate means is after this, after these two usages.
Let me check.
I think we're still going to be stuck on it as relates to the way in which we're interpreting the text, and I think that's the.
I don't know.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No.
I don't know if Steiner believes conscience to be a real thing. Because the times he's used it in the chapter, it's sort of this idea that we construct to put a label on something that's happening inside of us. But I don't think because the two times he uses it, it's in the context of sort of a naive person becoming a metaphysical realist, which is sort of a path of illusion, and they decide to call that conscience. So I don't think Steiner actually believes in what's like an ontological existence of conscience.
In us, only in us, as a self-creation, just like we create the concepts which we then recognize in the outside world. They are not like they're not injected into us. They are an act of creation within ourselves, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yes, but it's conscious. It's intuitive thinking. It's not conscientious thinking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Conscience is probably a barrier. I think that's probably why we're stuck, because it is supposed to be a barrier to what we're subject to.
So when we
what you described, that feeling that action I did was possibly wrong. I don't think that's what Steiner would call conscience, or what Steiner would say, or at least in this chapter. I don't think that's what he means by. I think that's what he means by intuitive thinking and reordering your,
Yes. So this freedom sort of hinges on this idea of what you're saying, Kate, because conscience. The conscience has so far been described as this inner voice that speaks to us, not us generating the ideas that give voice to the ideas themselves, but a sort of involuntary recognition of these pre-existing moral standards. And so that's why it's still up in the air for me, because there's clearly a lawfulness in relationship to reality. I really think that there's goodness in reality, and that we recognize goodness when we are in relationship with it. We harmonize with it, say. But it wouldn't be an abstract inner voice that just told us what to do, because that would be like God whispering in our ear. And it's funny because, this chapter is a funny one, because in some ways he claims all the things he says that aren't valid or sound, he actually discovers in spiritual science as true. Like there is a Godhead, there is the Christ, there are angels, and angels do speak to us, and we do have a moral sense, say, like the I would suggest that in the lower senses, you have the sense of well-being, and that the sense of well-being is the moral sense. And in a sense, there's a moral quality to the sense of smell, uh, and it's already inherent in us, but 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 it has to be uh, embodied and owned and part of our gaining ground in existential freedom for it to be to be soundly discovered, say. And anything that's been given is not reliable in this sense. It's not healthy. It's so in this case, the conscience that we interpret as this inner voice is ideas given to it by an external force.
But when it becomes an inner creation of our own being, then it's still reconcilable with true freedom.
Yeah, I'm just with Kate here. I don't think that I'm not sure that I believe that this is what Steiner would refer to as conscience.
Could it be that we also, rather than just like we're often tempted, people are tempted to talk in this binary sense about freedom, yes or no, rather than degrees of freedom, areas of freedom and areas of unfreedom, that also it's more useful to think about conscience as also a voice that we are developing within ourselves as we live through the various experiences that we have in life. We develop our own conscience. We develop that own inner voice through our experience. Let's say we do something that we regret afterwards. We realized it's caused pain, even if that wasn't our intention. And we want to, we really want to know the consequences of our actions, and therefore those consequences have to come back to us and inform us about how the effects of our actions in the real world, in the world. So that was a bit long-winded, but I'm wondering if it's helpful to think about it also in the terms of something that is growing within us, rather than like a ready-made product. Like bang, it's there. It's a capacity. It's a capability that's slowly developing in us. The more we imbue ourselves with.
And then it's the activity of the spiritual part of me and my experience, just like knowledge is the creation of those within. So conscience could be, I guess it's a knowledge, but it's not that where freedom is. Freedom is a parent of it, perhaps, but it's not the same as the intuition. I don't think that my intuition is trained, but I can train myself to be able to listen to my intuition. But my intuition does that work? Because it's already free. It is the free element in me. It doesn't need to be trained to be free. It is the free element in me. It's my interpreting that needs to be developed. It's like my knowledge is developed through experience and intuition.
And maturity and relationship with your emotional body and the degree to which you've done those things as in the past, the degree to which you've individualized, I imagine. So I think again we could bookmark conscience, because it's not. I don't think we have a definitive answer. It's totally worth exploring. It has been, but I think that it'll be interesting to see if it comes up again.
I did see it does come up in both chapter 11 and 12, only briefly, but it does come up.
That'll be interesting.
I'm going to say this now, and then we'll move on. But there's something. There's a little voice in my head. It's not my conscience, but it's a little voice in my head.
Sure, there is.
There's loads of them, but that's like that's whispering the words characterological disposition or subjective disposition, if there is a link there. But as you said, Jeff, and okay, we'll move on. But it'll be interesting to see if that comes up when he mentions it in the further chapters. Okay. This is that. Yeah, I'll read it again, and we can wax lyrical about this this wonderful idea. Rosebuds. For the world of ideas comes to expression not in a community of men, but only in human individuals. What appears as the common goal of a whole group of people is only the result of separate acts of will of its individual members, and in fact, usually of a few outstanding ones who, as their authorities, are allowed by the others. Each one of us has it in him to be a free spirit, just as every rosebud has its rose.
Yeah. Oh, that part actually made me quite angry. So I think we should talk about it.
Sorry, say again, Kate.
Oh, that I haven't really worked out my feelings properly towards this chapter, so I want you to.
Okay, yeah. Why do I love this image so much? I was recently reading, I think it was chapter 5 of Christianity as Mystical Fact. And right at the beginning of that chapter, or somewhere in that chapter, he's talking about imagine a plant being able to become aware of all the processes that it goes through from when it's a seed. It's like it lays down its roots. It sprouts up above the earth, and it's like sends out leaves and stalk and leaves and stalk and leaves and flower head and then finally into the seed building stage, and then like the plant dies away, but the seed is there. A plant obviously can't do that. Just like a plant can't look in a mirror and so like say to itself, gosh, I'm beautiful. But with our thinking, we are actually capable of gaining these at first very fleeting intuitions that we are this amazing being that is also in a process of growth, that laid down its roots and is involved in this growth process. We're so living into like in the moment of time, which in itself doesn't necessarily need to be bad. But when you can step back and look at yourself in this process, and yourself being the rosebud, which is, or perhaps even before it's even created a rosebud, it's like it's only got to the leafing stage. It hasn't even like got to start even beginning to think about that. But it's inherent in the rose itself that it will create this bud, and that we in ourselves, we have this because we are divine, or we have this divine aspect in us because we have this infinite capability to think, to receive from the spiritual world. In that, we have this ability to grow in our freedom. And you can encapsulate that all in such a simple image of rosebud to rose. Stick a rosebud in water, and just watch it go. For us, it's a little bit more difficult, but we've still got those possibilities. I think that's what I'm saying.
When I was listening to you talk, I realized, how am I going to put this? That I'm talking about, our discussion that we just had about conscience, our discussion about this, and our personal ethical relationship to these ideas and to our actions in the world is actually helping me to understand the process of knowledge. And it's interesting because the book is set up where you have to understand knowledge first, or not, like you don't have to understand it, but you're taken along the journey of what is knowledge, what is thinking, how is it coming about, as preparation for what is freedom, what is action, what are deeds, and what are, so you need to have that sort of ground for these concepts need to be kind of put in the idea world first. But it's interesting because when we started getting into the reality, I felt nervous because I thought, I don't think I'm ready yet, because I don't think my thinking is well organized enough, or I don't think my concepts or my knowledge is correct yet to act properly. And now I'm learning that as I learn about how I do act constantly, I'm always doing these things, and I am making deeds, and I can reflect on where those deeds came from. I understand the process of knowledge better, and that's quite awesome, isn't it? It's that they are two beautiful the roses that are blooming together, that they have to bloom together. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a mystery, that relationship between knowledge and freedom, to some extent. To me, it remains a bit of a mystery. Because there's a I mean, you can know how to utilize something, but that doesn't mean that you're going to that doesn't mean that there is any inherent freedom in knowing how to utilize it. But what seems to be coming to the fore here is that this knowledge is essential to freedom. That one can't act without knowing what the how the act is going to be lawful in a certain sense. And I think this is maybe I'm searching around here. This is the other beautiful thing about this process, is that we're not presenting something we already understand and we already know, right?
We're battling,
and it could look like, I mean, we could look like idiots as far as that. I don't know, but this, that maybe it's obvious to people that you have to have a concept, a true concept of reality in order to act freely in the world. And this sort of goes to the idea that there's something underlying all of this in the world that is already true, good, and beautiful, that is already laden with truth and goodness, and it is both apparent and a mystery to me, that relation.
There was a comment you made last week, Kate, which I really appreciated. You talked about when we moved into chapter 9, how you felt like the insecurity. It's like, take me back to the earlier chapters where you're creating this certainty. And I think again you're reflecting. What I'm hearing is the same type of idea. We all feel like we're flapping around a little bit here. But when the more often we return to this grounding that we've got in how thinking is a spiritual activity that lives within us, and it's an activity which we can cultivate. It's this region of the soul that he talks about at the beginning of the book that is going to be this. We're not going to provide fixed answers here. We're creating a region of the soul where freedom can be experienced. And as we return, I've read the earlier chapters a lot more than I've read the later chapters, because they have this strengthening, reaffirming, grounding into, like, in my own being, and there's there's one, I think it's in chapter 4, when he describes this bit just after he's been talking about Descartes, and he says, like, you feel like you've got a corner of the world that you can, like, hang on to. I can't remember the exact phrasing. And that, the more often I return to these, especially to the earlier chapters, the more this sense, the more the direct experience comes through, that this is genuinely, this isn't sort of like an idea that I'm buying into. No, this is a real description of what I am as a being, and that feeds deeply into this freedom question. I experience the freedom that his, when he guides us through the thinking activity, is an experience of freedom itself, which is still sort of like, it can be left to it's like just purely to the inner life, but in the later chapters, it's how do we apply that so that it's like lives in the outer world.
I think what I'm trying to point to is that people, I think Max talks about a lot, like knowledge as this relational process, and that you have to be in relationship to something and you have to love it in order to know it. And I suppose by tackling these ideas, these ethical ideas, and I mean it's so obvious. Every deed I have is in relationship to the world and with other people. That's obvious. With knowledge, because it's not so obvious, because it's the way it's abstracted things. But that's what I mean. That because freedom is a relational thing, is in relationship with what is already existing. It feels more real and more living and more alive in me. That, oh yes, knowledge is also that. It is also a relational thing. Do you know what I mean? And I want to. It helps me to approach, Goethe and science. It helps me locate the mood that I need to be in to do that kind of science, to do that kind of knowing. And I mean, this paragraph made me uncomfortable because it says something that is true, but I don't say that. Maybe, I mean, isn't said a lot that outstanding individuals are responsible for a lot of this. And I mean, Goethe was an outstanding individual. And what is an outstanding individual but someone who asserts his own freedom and follows his love of things, and he's master of so many things and becomes a polymath, and it depends on your own will to do it and your own love for it, and it's not easy.
No.
That's why I don't want to hear that. I don't want to be told that it's actually all up to me, really, and it's my responsibility to be outstanding and to contribute to the world the way Goethe did. And I'm already on the, there, but at least I'm locating these sort of internal moods that I need to live through in order to do this work properly. That it's like a soul coloring that I have to generate in order that I can really see what's going on, really be in relationship with my process in an intuitive way. It's a soul coloring that comes out of knowing what ethical freedom is.
beautifully put. It is. It is this fear aspect of freedom. I think it's really. It is. It's paradoxical, isn't it? We all. We all want to be free, but then it almost becomes scary, this idea of
I think that comes back to the character.
infinite possibilities. So what am I going to do? What am I really passionate about? How far am I prepared to go in my love for whatever it is I choose to dedicate myself to? Is that love genuine, or is it just like a passing whim? There's a lot of room for self-deception in these type of questions, and as well, and we'll be found out, I guess. It's that's part of
The word passion I've been thinking about, because that passion, I mean, the original meaning of passion is actually something that acts on you from without.
Yeah.
It's something that you think. And so that learning that definition, that etymology of the word, because now people say, I'm really passionate about this. And which just means I like doing it.
Yeah.
And I want to do it, which is not the same thing, really. We've kind of really flipped the meaning of that word, and we've also made it less powerful, which we do a lot. But so I don't want to use the word passion. I want to use the word choice. I choose to do these things, and I have to bring that choice every single time I do it. And it's not finding what I'm passionate about. It's not finding because I think what the passions act on your characterological disposition.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of there. It's in your astral body. It's in what you like and dislike. And that the astral body is that passionate body, isn't it? And it's acting, and it sways the eye. Do this, do that, do this, do that. But I don't think Goethe's passion for plants is the same thing as a lot of other people's passions. But they just do it because they love it and they like it and it makes them feel good. He's doing it because he's choosing over and over and over again to be in relationship with a person properly, to be in relationship with the world properly. And it's nothing that can ever be. You don't get to a point and then go, I can continue, and the train tracks are there and I don't have to do it anymore. Something that you have to choose over and over again, and that's the scary part, because it's hard. But it's also the fun, because we do it all the time anyway.
Yeah, and it increasingly puts you in relationship with the world, doesn't it? It doesn't take you off into some sort of hermitage, because in some ways the world is the world holds the riddles for that which that which you need to choose to do. You can't just do it in isolation. You have to do it in relationship to reality. Just like Zach Stein brought this up, I thought, in a very beautiful way with Ian McGilchrist, and he said that we respond to that which is good, that which is inherently valuable, the same way we respond to gravity. Like, gravity's real, and our sensory motor system is adjusted to it, so that we learn to stand up and walk around and be oriented in gravitational space. And it's also true with the more freedom one gains in relationship to one's own nature, the more one has to be in relationship with nature as a whole itself. And you can't be wrong about that. And you have to be deepening your embodied relationship with what it is to be a human being in relationship to other human beings, but also the way in which you are part of this natural world, that you are choosing to deepen your relationship with and enter more and more deeply into itself, incarnate into itself. That's daunting.
I was also thinking about in other works where he talks about that the emotional life, the likes and the dislikes, the passions, the hates that we have, that what the spiritual scientist doesn't just stay at the emotional reaction, but looks at her reaction to a specific thing in terms of what does that tell me about myself, what does that tell me about the world, rather than it just being left at the astral body level. It's permeated with thinking, so that I grow in understanding about the world. So I think the reason why I'm saying that is being passionate about something is only a problem if it stays at that, and it doesn't. That passion doesn't lead to somehow an improvement. Going back to our moral maxims, like an improvement in myself or society around me as a result of that passion, or it's like a growing understanding through that passion. Yeah. Okay. Should we move on to the last one? Changing changelessness. Okay. This one. This was the part where he was talking about the pendulum in the addendum chapter of this chapter. And I also thought it was one of these images that it's a little bit like the unfree free. It has movement within it. It allows for a flexibility. I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to say why I talked about it in terms of changing changelessness. And I think we might end up getting into a little bit of a pickle with our ideas there as well, because these are difficult topics to tease out. But anyway, I'll read it. It is a characteristic feature of the essential nature of man that what can be intuitively grasped swings to and fro within man, like a living pendulum between universally valid knowledge and the individual experience of it. For those who cannot see the one half of the swing in its reality, thinking remains only a subjective human activity. For those who cannot grasp the other half, man's activity in thinking will seem to lose all individual life. And it's this universality of thinking is this changelessness. It's this another way of the products of thinking are concepts, and these are these spiritual archetypes in themselves are unchanging. They are that on which everything else is, if you like, modeled. It's the essence. That's what a concept is. It's the essence of a something. But when we're talking about it in terms of motives and the moral life, that even though it's a universal, as soon as we intuit it, when we have a moral intuition, it automatically becomes a changed part of this changelessness. It's not the whole full essential nature. It's one embodiment. It's been put through my characterological disposition filter. In a way, my strengths and my weaknesses, my likes and my dislikes, and also here I feel it's like a space being created for us as human beings, where we have got this. We've got this Christ ideal. We've got the moral maxims, which are these universals to which we choose to strive, but that it is not about like copy and pasting that same universal. It is for us about finding our own individual relationship to that universal. And it seems, because he wrote this in the addendum, it seems this is an area that people struggled with when they read his work first time around, so that he had to write this 25 years later. If you've got any thoughts or reflections on the pendulum bit.
Yes, I do. The second sentence, or the sentence after this, to the first kind of thinker, it is the act of knowing that is unintelligible. To the second kind, it is the moral life. I think this is exactly what I was talking about just before, that as my intelligibility of knowing deepens, so does my intelligibility of the moral life, and vice versa, and that this pendulum hopefully could swing infinitely in either direction, and that it is that reciprocity, that it's not one for the next one, but it's one for each other. It's each for each other. And it's interesting because we were talking about the development of the inner voice, maybe, and I was thinking about this idea that I came across. Have you heard of Julian James?
Say the name again.
Julian James?
No, don't. Tell us about him.
The bicameral mind guy?
The bicameral mind guy. I read his book and I liked that he has this good example of how you can track the way our consciousness and our relationship to moral maxims have changed. And you have the earlier chapters of the Bible, the really early ones, the way they describe it, it is hear and call and this voice of God from without that someone heard and it was commanding them. And then the later chapters, they take on more of that quality of the modern mind that we're familiar with, where it's sort of, it kind of tells a story and it sort of is an internalized thing. And it's about making judgments for yourself about what is right, but it is still in the Word of God. And then I'm thinking about what are the, and then you have to have those external commandments given to you so that you can order your life and order your ethical. And then what do you have in the New Testament but love God and love your neighbor? And what is that but deepening your intelligibility of morality, people who met your neighbors, and deepening your intelligibility of intuition through freedom and knowledge through God. And they build on each other and they are essential to each other.
I think be interesting to hear Jeff reflect on this as well. But this one of the aspects of aging is you've got more experience of this swinging of the pendulum, and perhaps I'm particularly impacted by biography work and this idea of looking at your biography work. It's like identifying patterns as like how you've grown. It's like through adversity, amongst other things. And one of the places that you arrive at, that you can arrive at, and certainly I've arrived at. I'm not like saying arrived at as in a final destination, but comparing to where I was, let's say 20 years ago, a lot more conviction in the fact that life will serve me up with exactly what I need, the challenges that I need, and the support that I need to move forward. The world, if I can find a relationship where I'm continually asking myself the question, not continually, so the strange and the new events that happen in my life, or the glitches in the matrix, those things that's like stick out and you go, it's like, how did that happen? Why did that happen? And learning to have more patience. And it's like, this is part of the process. This is the rosebud sort of like unfurling, so like the leaves on the outside before the blossom can come out, or something like that. And I'm in my own mind, I'm convinced that this is also one of the byproducts of reading the philosophy of freedom, just a trust in life itself, that life has meaning, and if I continue to look for the meaning and the hints that are served up to me in my experiences, I'm waffling on a little bit, so I'm just going to sort of say one thing very concrete here. That's one of the things that I've identified in my own life, which is that when something that's somewhat out of the ordinary happens, or if I've picked up on a certain idea or a certain book or a certain person, and I'm in two minds as to whether I should sort of dedicate time to that or to something else, or a third thing. If events in the world that are beyond my control, so like start mentioning, so let's say you mentioned that name. What was his name? James?
Julian James.
Julian James. So let's say that for an example, and let's say it's like 2 days ago, I'd happened to see a couple of videos. I haven't, but let's just say for as an example, let's say I was reading something, I was particularly captured by that, and then you come along today and say, "Oh, this is really interesting," and so like I'm finding it really useful. So that's something that I haven't been able to control. It's not something I've asked you to comment on. It's like the world has supplied it to me. Yeah. And then let's say, so like sometime next week, a colleague at work or someone else, again, a part of the world that I can't impact, starts talking to me about Julian James, then I feel like that's the world talking to, like gently hinting, yeah, go down that path. There's something there's something there for you. And this is that sort of that free relationship for me between, it's like being the person, an individual with drive to do certain things, but also this quality where, okay, I could be fooling myself here. So let's see what the rest of the world is, how it's reacting to my own interaction with it. Yeah. Do you have anything like that, Jeff? Is that does that ring any bells with you, or does it send you off? You're thinking off in any particular direction?
I don't really think. I think it's you've both said beautifully what your experience is. I don't really have anything to add to this. Yeah, I think this stands alone here. I mean, what would it mean to perceive the pendulum originating out of the universally valid, meaning to be able to attend to it as it swings into the individualized experience of that which is universally valid, and then the way in which we can trace the way in which we form concepts and go through this existential process to understand the world and try to act freely in it. But then how does one hold individually to this this realm out of which the universally valid originates, so that you're holding both in tension, I guess. So I just have that. I have that question.
Okay.
I tend to swing from one to the other, right? So, like I've got it, and then like more personally involved in my own. It's either or for me, more so. Yeah, I guess you've achieved a greater maturity than I have.
I can see the benefit, but I was thinking, I can experience it as a beautiful thing, but when I'm confronted with a decision that I have to make, I can't. I am in a different. I become more binary because I'm in a different mood. I suddenly have these objectives in my head, and I can't let the image speak for itself. And it's one thing to carve out how this beautiful thing, and it's another thing to let it actually inform my actions in the world. And I was thinking about how, as a child, I've always been someone who watches and doesn't like to ask questions about how things work and how you do something. And it was always this sort of like, I don't want to fail, but I want to watch. And if I watch carefully enough, and if I listen carefully enough, and if I do my own research quietly and hiddenly and secretly, then I can do it perfectly. That's fine. Something that I'm growing out of, but it still exists. It still is just going to dynamic. And it came into my head because I use the word ontological before, and I don't actually know if I use it correctly, but I thought I'm using it because that's what a child does, that learns how to use language, and I can still be imperfect. I mean, it's such an obvious thing. You know, nobody's perfect, and you've got to try, you've got to practice in order to do something. But I don't have many passions. I don't have many things that I must do because, and I realize it's because I don't want to fail and I want to do them first. But I have to.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
I'd love to ask a question. I think I probably have excuse me, hit upon asking this question several times throughout our work together, and I as you're talking about that, I'm reminded of the question, but also reminded of the experience. I must have been there were several instances of this throughout my childhood, and I think it started to fade away around 11 or 12 years old, but I remember it at 10, and I distinctly remembered at 5. I was bent over. I used to go out into our yard and overturn rocks and look at bugs, just like this whole little Edenic little creature world. And I don't know, maybe I had a bug collector and I would catch them and put them in it, but it was really not about that. And I remember feeling the all at onceness, like the universally experience, the universe experience as a oneness. And I always wondered if I was waking up, because this seems to be what he's talking about from an experiential standpoint. Not that of a child, but I wonder if I was waking up out of this universal consciousness, or if I was just self-aware enough to say, wow. And then it would manifest later in different ways. Like I would say, I would be watching my my older sister and with her friends, and there would be patterns of relationship, and I would look at them and I'd say to myself, that is a pattern that repeats itself all over the world. That is a universal thing that's happening right there. I wouldn't use those words, of course, but that was my experience. That is the world makes perfect sense, because that is an example of everything else, something like that. Right.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's the tracking of this. It's a very naive way to put it. But I wonder if that's the tracking of this pendulum swing, and then just the noticing of that. And then, yeah, that's the way I relate to this most powerfully, I think. And do you guys remember that, having that experience when you were a kid, or some variation on that?
Yeah. I definitely experience that as well when I'm reading the philosophy of freedom. It's a similar. I personally experience it in a similar way. But it's enough. I don't know. What about you, Andy?
A direct memory of what you're saying isn't coming to mind, but it's like whilst you're saying that, I was reminded very strongly of William Wordsworth's Ode to Immortality. This line, it's like trailing clouds of glory. There's this strong consciousness that I've come from in the poem. I've come from this other world. I've come from I've come from the world of light, and I'm slowly incarnating into this world here. And he talks about the prison house, and you've also got this little pendulum going on there, where he's reminiscing about the world that he came from pre-birth. That's like what it's like gradually waking up into. It's like living in a body, and then it's like reminding himself, and then gradually, obviously, getting deeper and deeper and deeper into the experience of the physical realm. But not. There's no memory of mine that's coming. I've had other experiences. I think I talked about. Did I talk about? I talked about like those 3 dreams that I had, which is also a different. It's not the same universal that you're talking about there, but it was that this fundamental question of where is reality, or are there 2 realities?
I remember learning about math in science school, which is a lovely way to learn about math. And I remember the teacher asked me a question, or I can answer the question, and I hadn't really been paying attention, and I'd been kind of distracted by my friends, and then she brought my attention. It's just like this beautiful memory of her bringing my attention to what was on the blackboard, and bringing my attention to the question, and my attention was of all these faces looking at me, and I wasn't quite sure. And there was people telling me what the answer was, and showing me with their fingers. And without even thinking it, I just said the correct answer because I just knew that it was a universal. I didn't know it, but it just came out of me. And afterwards, when I realized I was right, that's the kind of feeling of that is a universal thing. This that you can get insight out of something in just a second, especially in that amazing childlike state where it's still so plastic. You do, you can do this, you get those insights, and it feels very special. And I mean, it's quite different from the bugs, but I think it was a similar feeling of just this all at once.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah. In a way, this pendulum swing is childhood and then adulthood. As most of us live in some degree of self-absorption as adults, as self-conscious adults, and most of us have come in trailing clouds of glory, to put it in Wordsworthian and Waldorfian terms. I'm also reminded in this that the way in which Steiner himself works in his other works is that he'll go into a very specific example or very specific set of phenomena, and then suddenly we're talking about Saturn evolution, right? We're talking about the evolution of the Earth through the phases, and it's a kind of breathing that occurs. Yeah, and I think the work. Yeah, well, I think the work is to allow is a sort of what what's his name, Ben Aharon calls
Yeshaya Ben Haron. Yeah.
Yes, a sort of spiritual yoga, or that's not right, moral yoga, or well, it's what Steiner calls moral breathing.
Yeah. Okay. Should we leave it there for today?
Okay.
I'll press the end of recording.